Welcome to the Leadership Art Podcast. I'm your host, Art Robbins, and it's great to have you join us. Today, I want to take you into a sweltering jury room in 1957. One table, 12 men, a teenager's life hanging in the balance, and one of the most powerful leadership case studies ever put on film. 12 Angry Men, directed by Sidney Lumet. A jury has just heard the case against a teenage boy accused of murdering his father. Guilty verdict means death. The first vote takes less than 1 minute. 11 hands go up for guilty. One does not. That one man is Juror 8, played by Henry Fonda. And in the next 96 minutes, in that single oppressive room, he will do something that most leaders spend entire careers trying to figure out. He will move 11 people who have already decided from certainty to doubt, from doubt to reconsideration, and from reconsideration to a completely different verdict, an acquittal. He does this with no title. No authority, no allies, no second chance. Those who have seen this movie remember exactly how it feels to watch this happen. The miracle is watching how he gets there. Most business schools teach this film as a lesson in group dynamics, but I want to use it as a leadership laboratory because it contains some of the hardest, most practical leadership challenges any of us will ever face. 6 lessons. Let's go. Lesson 1, the courage to stand alone and hold it. Juror 8 raises his hand alone, and here is what makes that remarkable. He doesn't have a counter-argument ready. He is not sure if the defendant is innocent. He says so explicitly. His entire position is simply this. He is not ready to send a man to death without talking about it first. 11-1. The pressure is immediate. Several jurors are annoyed. One would rather be at the ball game. And Juror 8 sits there and holds his position, not because he's certain he is right, but because he is certain the group hasn't thought carefully enough. Most of us would have folded. The social pressure of unanimous opposition is one of the most powerful forces in organizational life. It doesn't announce itself as pressure. It arrives dressed as common sense. If everyone agrees, maybe I'm missing something. But the leaders who change outcomes are the ones who can sit in that discomfort and hold their position in the face of pressure. Lesson 2. Persuasion is not argument. Here's what Juror 8 never does across the entire film. He never tells anyone they're wrong. He never makes a direct case for innocence. He never says, you should believe what I believe. Instead, he asks questions. He introduces doubt into the conclusions people have already reached. He slows the room down. And he creates the one thing that actually allows people to change their minds in public, permission to reconsider without losing face. Most leaders persuade by arguing harder, better data, stronger logic, more evidence, and then they simply wonder why people dig in. The reason is simple. Direct argument makes changing position feel like defeat. Nobody wants to be wrong in front of 11 strangers. Persuasion is not argument. It is the creation of conditions in which people can persuade themselves. Lesson 3, turning adversaries into advocates, but it's not the way you think. The mistake most leaders make, they try to convert their adversary, win the argument, make them admit you were right. This rarely works. Juror 8 never tries to make anyone his advocate. Instead, he removes the architecture of their opposition. He doesn't attack their position, he examines it, holds it up to the light, asks whether it actually holds under scrutiny, and gradually the jurors discover their certainty was built on something shakier than they thought. Here's the honest caveat. There is a difference between someone who becomes a genuine advocate and someone who simply can no longer defend their original position. Both move in the same direction, but they are not the same thing. Juror 3, played by Lee J. Cobb, who is the loudest voice in the room, does not become an advocate for the defendant. He runs out of reasons to maintain his opposition. And when the real source of his certainty is finally exposed, which is his estrangement from his own son, which has been driving his verdict all along, he breaks. Not because Juror 8 won the argument, because the wound underneath the argument was finally exposed. When you are trying to turn a genuine adversary, ask what is actually underneath their opposition. If you address the argument and miss the wound, you will win every debate and still lose the room. Lesson 4, one shot, no relationship, what now? This is the theme nobody talks about, and the most practical one for situations leaders actually face. These 12 men will never see each other again. No ongoing relationship, no future favor, no reputation beyond this afternoon. The normal currency of organizational persuasion, reciprocity, trust built over time, does not exist in this room. But some of the most important leadership moments are one-time transactions. A board you're presenting to for the first time. A client you'll never see again if you don't win this pitch. A crisis conversation with someone who has already decided to leave. Juror 8's answer, he doesn't try to build relationship. There's no time. He makes the stakes themselves the common ground. He keeps returning to one thing. A man's life is on the line. The shared weight of the decision replaces the shared history he doesn't have. In a one-shot situation, find the thing that matters equally to everyone in the room and anchor there. That's the substitute for a relationship capital you haven't had the time to build. Lesson 5. Irreversibility changes the standard. Juror 8 will not vote guilty without deliberating, not because he thinks the defendant is innocent, but because he understands the nature of this decision. It cannot be undone. Many leaders apply the same decision-making process regardless of reversibility, and they shouldn't. Reversible decisions should be made efficiently with sufficient information. The cost of being wrong is the cost of course correction. Irreversible decisions deserve more time, more scrutiny, and a higher threshold of certainty. The organizational application, most irreversible decisions don't feel irreversible at the moment. A termination, an acquisition, a strategic pivot that closes off alternatives. They arrive without a warning label. Put the label on yourself. Before you act, ask, if I'm wrong about this, what does the cost actually look like? If the answer is something you cannot recover from, you are in Juror 8's jury room, so slow down accordingly. And finally, lesson 6. The loudest voice is not always the right one, and silence is a strategy. Ed Begley plays Juror 10, the garage owner whose prejudice against the defendant erupts into a rant so ugly that the other jurors, one by one, physically turn away from him, including his former allies. What is fascinating is not the rant itself, it is what Juror 8 does during it. Nothing. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't argue. He lets Juror 10 exhaust himself and trusts the room to draw its own conclusion. Confronting a powerful, emotionally invested voice directly tends to make them a martyr. It escalates rather than resolves. The alternative, which Juror 8 practices throughout, is to never make the loud voice the subject. Keep returning to the evidence, the question, the decision. Let their own behavior make the argument you don't need to make. The one thing to take away from today: Juror 8 does not win because he's smarter, louder, or more persuasive than 11 other men. He wins because he's more patient, more honest about what he doesn't know, more committed to getting it right than to being seen as right. He walks into that room without an answer. He walks out having helped 11 other people find one. That's not a communication skill. That's not a negotiating tactic. That's character applied under pressure in a room full of people who wanted him to just sit down and be quiet. And one by one, they came to him. Not because he was right and they were wrong, because he created a space where being honest about doubt was safer than pretending to be certain. That is rarer than it sounds, and it's one of the highest things a leader can do. The hardest leadership challenge is never changing someone's mind. It's creating the conditions in which they change it themselves. Your jury room is out there. It might be a boardroom. It might be a budget meeting. It might be a conversation you've been avoiding. Walk in and take the lead. Thank you again to our listeners and followers for your continued support. And check out our new book, Leadership Art, Certain Leadership in an Age of Uncertainty, available on Amazon. So until the next episode of the Leadership Art Podcast, this is your host, Art Robbins, and remember, it's your lead.